Okay.
All right, welcome everybody to our June Forgotten Grapes Wine Club virtual tasting. We are so excited to have Sandra Gomes Rocha with us today. She is the owner and proprietor and chief importer of
DIniz Cellars.
DIniz Cellars.
Yes.
DIniz Cellars.
hmm
I'm being mocked by Allison and Sandra for my pronunciation,
I
which is
don't
fine.
speak Portuguese.
No, nope.
No, but you've spent a lot of time in
Yes.
Portugal, so you've spent probably more time in Portugal than I have. So I
I
trust both of you on the pronunciation more than I do myself. But anyway, we're excited to have Sandra here to talk about these fabulous international wines, all from Portugal. I feel like once a year it's fun to take a step back from the domestic wines, the California wines, and focus on some international producers. So we are going to take a trip over to the Atlantic and have Sandra be our guide through these fantastic wines. As always, before we begin, just everybody mute yourselves if you can, and I will mute you as needed. We've got the chat open, so if you have any questions, comments, food pairings, whatever it might be for Sandra, for myself, for Allison, throw that into the group chat, and we'll be happy to ask those to Sandra as the questions come up. We just went over the order that we'll be drinking through. And of course, at the end, if we've got a little bit of extra time, if Sandra is willing, we'll open up the channels. Everybody can unmute themselves and you can ask her any specific questions you like. But with that, I would like to throw it over to Allison because you've got a pre-existing relationship with Sandra. So if you could introduce our special guest, I would appreciate it.
Okay. I wasn't planning to do that. I've known
Well, if you don't want to,
Sandra.
we can just let Sandra introduce herself.
All the curveballs.
No. I've known Sandra for a few years. I'm trying to remember where we first met. Was it at a Wines of Portugal event, or was it through?
It may have been through Women for Wine Sense. It may have been in one of those events.
No, I think you were involved before I got involved with that. Anyway, our paths cross a lot. She lived in Los Angeles, and we either met at a Wines of Portugal event or at some event I did that she came to, or this is just what happens when you know people and you just don't remember where you met them. But
right.
Sandra is newer to wine relative. When she started the import company, she's been working at Disney for years, and I think we still have one person.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. I just so she works at Disney, and throwing her passion to her heritage and bringing in all these wonderful family-owned smaller producers from all over Portugal. I've had the privilege and pleasure to taste a few of the wines over time. And I think during COVID, so Stacy and boys, you might remember when we did a Wine Weirdos Santa Barbara wine thing. We had some of her wine. She wasn't in it, but we had some of the Portuguese wines in it. When we did, we did a island wines. That's right. We had Portuguese wine. So anyway, I just love, any importer that brings in small family wines, because we love the small family wines here. So I won't talk anymore. Sandra, you can talk about yourself.
So go ahead, Sandra.
No, it's just like I get to talk about myself. As the introvert in me, I'm just like, wait, no. But I, first of all, obrigada for having me. It's a beautiful evening, and I'm so blessed to know Allison and Chris, and for them to give me the opportunity to get to talk to you guys. And I get to talk a lot. I do talk a lot, so stop me if I'm not making any sense. But no, I started this company we incorporated in 2017, and we started with our first mixed palette in 2018. And I did everything in a very corporate way because I'm still very much with Disney marketing. So I was like, all right, I need a focus group. So everybody come to my house. I had like 37 wines, and I was like, all right, here's a card. Anything that hit above 50%, we knew we could manage with. So basically my strategy there was like, if I could get a group of people together that the only thing that they had to have in common was that they like to drink wine. It didn't matter whether you didn't know your whites from your reds, or if you were like expert level, like I know all the varieties and all the regions and all the things, that I'm the expert, and everybody in between. If I could get everybody together and say, okay, try this wine. What do you think? Do you like it? Do you not like it? That was literally the only like qualifier, right? And what I felt was that if I could get the average of these people and anything that hit above 50%, then I knew that the California market would be receptive to it. Because when I go to Portugal and I select wines, I go with the Californian palate in mind, right? Because Portuguese wines could be very rustic and very Portuguese and very like out there. And if
especially
I want
the
to
red
have
wine, especially the red.
Yes, especially the red wines. But actually, I'm finding a lot more like the whites are so much more eccentric, which as we're going to see here. So I wanted to bring to market something that people were going to recognize, but that was still different enough where it's just like, okay, if you like this style, then we can build a bridge to this wine here, and then you can see the similarities or the differences. It's still unique and authentic, but it lives in a place that people can recognize. And that's kind of how I got started. And then the pandemic hit, and we actually did really well because Disney had furloughed me, and we could do direct to consumer. So we were able to do that online. So we were okay. And I was still learning a lot about the business, and I'm still learning a lot about the business, and I'm still doing both jobs, Disney and DIniz Cellars. I joke that my hat closet is bigger than my apartment because I wear all the hats. And it's just me and my husband. My husband is actually a non-drinker. He's been nearly 20 years in recovery.
We won't hold that against him.
We won't. But he gives me money to buy, which I really appreciate. But he literally lives in a wine shop because my entire house looks like a wine shop. But God bless him, and he's incredibly supportive. But and it's been really fun. And what I love is just to show people these wines and to get their true, honest to God opinion. And I will tell you right now that if there's a wine that you're not vibing with, you're not going to be offending me personally. I didn't make them; I just bring them, right? So
exactly.
And we can certainly get more into that.
Very
but
nice.
Chris,
yeah.
you were
as
going
to well, I was going to say, as a fellow survivor of the Mouse House and also somebody who uses research and does focus groups, I came from the research side of things in my own wine brand. I appreciate that. I appreciate even the 50% threshold. I think is a fun way to do it. That's a cool way to do it. We're going to be starting with the Cadmarvor, the Fernao Pires. From the Azores. So, we're not even starting on mainland Portugal. We're heading our trip, and we're hitting the island stop on our way to Portugal across there. Let's talk a little bit about this wine. How did you come to select this one? Obviously, Portugal is known for having a lot of island colonies around not outside of Portugal. And the Azores, very cool environment, kind of that North Atlantic area. So talk to us a little bit about the growing area for this, and the Fernao Pires grape, for those who aren't familiar with it.
And actually, if Sandra, before you jump in, I was just going to say, you're going to talk about the Azores, but I think for people who have traveled to Portugal or dreamt about traveling to Portugal, Madeira is the island for wine, and Azores are usually known for the beautiful, well, Madeira is beautiful scenery too, but Azores for all the hiking and walking and nature, not for wine.
It's got a lot of fjords.
So I mean, also talk about what the Azores are, but also how much wine is actually grown there.
So for people not familiar with the archipelago, Azores is to Portugal, but Hawaii is to the United States. Okay, so the Azores are about 1,700 miles west of Portugal, and there's 9 islands. So where this wine comes from is the Pico Island, and it's called Pico because there's a literal volcano on the island. I believe it's still active, and it's the highest point in all of Portugal. So both the islands and the continent. So they call it the Peak or Pico, right? So in like traditional island life, you have a lot of volcanic rock. So imagine imagine a vast land that's just black volcanic rock. And in this island, you have what they call coladas, or they have like these little sunken vineyards, right? So every vine is surrounded by like a 3 or 4 foot tall wall of volcanic rock. So of course, these people had to feed themselves throughout, the generations. So you can't grow on rock. So you have to dig deep into actual nutrient-rich soil. And what do you do with those rocks? You build walls. So it's able to protect your crops from the very harsh maritime climate. So islands are beautiful and they're sunny, but they're incredibly temperamental when it comes to their weather patterns. So having these walls actually protects the vines, and the vines are actually crawling on the ground. So it's not trellis like you usually would.
Oh, interesting.
So, and it's a beautiful juxtaposition of just like black and green against like this incredibly beautiful blue sky. And the people who are working these fields, they're working it, right? Because everything has to be hand work. There's not a whole lot of machinery that is coming in from the mainland, because in your island life, of course, everything is incredibly
I've walked
more
on lava
expensive.
beds. It's not easy.
No, it's not. But they actually have been growing, making wine there for quite a while. Not as long as mainland Portugal, and not every island is a wine producing island. I know Pico is. I believe San Miguel is as well. So I can't give you percentages as to like how much wine is actually being grown there, but they're making quite a bit, and they are exporting to other markets. And you're starting to see a lot more of these wines here in the United States, especially in California. So I'm a Jersey girl, and I grew up in your traditional, super conservative Catholic Portuguese communities in Jersey that are more immigrants from Portugal. They have much more of that connectivity to the continent. And here in California, you have your second, third generation Portuguese from the islands. So when people came here, they came here for the whaling industry, because they did a lot of whaling back there. They did it in Madeira as well. So those people came out here to work in the whale industry and the dairy industry as well. A lot of the Portuguese that I know here, their grandparents or their great grandparents came to actually work in the dairy lands. So it's a very agricultural rich community. But now they're actually stepping up their game when it comes to their wine production. And this particular producer, he's the youngest winemaker on the island at 22 years old.
Wow.
And it's pretty incredible what he's doing. He actually has another wine that we carry. It's a rosé. It's called the Lágrimas de Mãe, or Tears of My Mother. And it's in honor of his mother, who is a breast cancer survivor. So it's very much like a family connection history to the land as well. And what led me to them is actually a client in Merced. So Central Valley, again, second, third generation.
Lots
island,
of Portuguese out there in Modesto, Merced, Visalia, that whole area.
So she's like, look, I'm opening up a wine shop. I want wines from the Azores, specifically these 3 or 4. I'm like, okay, let me give them a call. And these people were game, and they're like, yeah, oh my God, America? Absolutely. Everybody wants to be here, right? So we brought them in, and we're like, okay, let's see how people feel about Azorean wines. And I joked that these wines actually take 2 boats to get here. So from the islands to Lisbon, and from Lisbon all the way around.
I was wondering about that, if the boat stops in the Azores to pick them up, or if you have to have them moved to Lisbon.
It's quite a commute. It's quite a commute. So it's easier to have them send it to.
They have to go east before they can come west.
Yes, correct. So, it's quite a trek for them to get here. But once they do, they're actually starting to pick up more steam, and you're starting to see a lot more wines from this island in particular. I believe there's like 4 or 5 producers, some of them bigger than others. But this guy, Lucas, again, 22 years old, and I think that he's doing a pretty incredible job.
When you said that the vines, I've been to some other islands. I've been to Pantelleria, where the vines are buried underneath and then grow out. And even the olive trees are pressed on the ground, where the limbs grow out because rocks hold them down because of wind. And I've been to Santorini, where they twist them in the braid. So here, is it dug down and just lower vines head trained, or are they held down? Like, what is the
They're actually so different producers use different tactics, but the Lucas Amarals, they actually allow the shoots to actually grow out. So they're not necessarily like trained like you would like in Santorini, but you actually see them along the ground and along the walls themselves. So you're not actually having like a head train per se.
But they're kept from growing up.
Correct. They're kept
the shoots are trained to basically go horizontal rather than vertical.
Correct. Because if you have those harsh winds, you have no crops, you have no plants, you have no grapes, you have nothing.
And how do they train them? By putting stones to hold them down the way I've seen trees? Because they're not trellised in any way.
They're not trellised, but I don't think they're using rocks to
I imagine it's through the trimming, like in the off-season trimming, they probably cut them short and kind of train them to go where they want to go.
But something would have to hold it down, because if there's no wires, you can't bend the stick down and make it stay.
No, you can't. But they do train the actual shoots to remain at the bottom. And, if you let the shoots kind of grow wild, they can just go all over the place. So yes, in the pruning process, they're keeping those wild shoots down and actually keeping the producing shoots closer to the ground. I actually had to ask them whether they're using like a rock or they're using some sort of other mechanism to actually hold the shoots down, but they're absolutely trained as close to the bottom to the floor as possible, just to keep them healthy.
Oh, go ahead, Allison.
I was just wondering, is this a grape that's indigenous to the Azores or to this island, or is it?
No, it's not indigenous. It's actually more indigenous to the continent. Bairrada and Tejo, I think, is where you find this one mostly, and it has a separate name. So Portugal has over 250 native varieties, but half of them have a separate name. So
got it. And the two you mentioned, the two regions, Bairrada and what was it, Joeta? Was that it?
Tejo.
Tejo. Okay.
So Tejo is
Alentejo. Is that?
It's Tejo. There's Alentejo and Tejo. Alentejo is to the south. So Alentejo, think of like a California. It's really warm and very hot. It's more like plain lands, right? Tejo is actually east of Lisbon, like northeast. So it follows the river.
Closer to the Spanish border,
River.
like the Extremadura area over there.
But closer to Lisbon. So Tejo is, and I wish I had a map, but I don't. But if you see Lisbon is right here, pretend that you're looking at the map, right? Lisbon is right here, then Tejo is going to be like over here. If Spain is over there, then Tejo is literally right next door. And that was known more to be a bulk wine producing region. But they're actually starting to grow grapes there specifically for higher quality wines. But this one actually came in from the mainland. But this producer is also growing Merlot and Syrah. So not just Portuguese varieties, they're also growing international varieties, which is that rosé that I told you about that was in honor of their mom. It's made with those international varieties. And honestly, that is the only wine that we have in our portfolio that is not Portuguese varieties. So we don't have a Cabernet, we don't have a Chardonnay. We have wines that have grapes that are indigenous to Portugal, and that's it. But the rosé is the only one that we have that is international varieties only, and that's because that particular client was looking for that rosé specifically. But usually we just try to bring in what's authentic to Portugal.
So are there any indigenous grapes to the Azores?
Not that I'm particularly aware of, but I don't know all the grapes that are being grown there. So that's actually a question for me to study. So thank you for that.
And I did Google it, by the way. And Fernao, Pires, which is a boy's name, is also known as Maria Gomes.
Maria Gomes. That's just what I'm saying. It's just like, I'm fully Portuguese, and my parents were born and raised in Portugal, and they're part of the mass exodus that happened in the late 70s. And there's a whole reason for that. But, knowing the way that my parents and my family grew up as agriculture people, they're very casual, right? So if you live up the road from your cousin and your cousin was growing a vine, he's like, hey, here's a cutting from my vine. What is it? I don't know. Whatever, just plant it. Or they will come up with a name. It's just like, there's a grape variety called Tintacão. Tintacão is like red dog. Tinta means red,
Oh
and
God,
count is.
stop.
I'm trying to figure out
Named
what
after
part of the
Clifford.
grape.
It's a big grape, right? So it's probably named after Clifford.
Maybe, perhaps. I mean,
the big red dog.
The big red dog. Yeah, exactly.
chances are they didn't have television at that time, so they probably looked at
Oh
like the
man.
color
If
of.
I ever make a Tinta Cow wine, I'm calling it Clifford 100%.
Please do,
Yeah.
please do, and let me sell it. So,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
no, so you can have the same variety and have different names. Like we have Tempranillo in Portugal, but it's called Tinta Roriz in the north, and it's
Right.
called Aragonés in the south. So
Okay.
we borrow, but we still call it native and indigenous.
You're
So
getting
there's a lot
ahead
of
of you're
creative.
getting ahead of yourself with the Aragones. That's a nice tease.
Yes,
I
I
do
know.
want to ask about the Azores. Is there an old world European wine region that would be comparable to the same growing and climate conditions of the Azores, given its maritime, the high winds? I mean, personally, it brings to mind a place like the Muscadet wines, grown on the
Mm-hmm.
Atlantic coast in France, much further north in Europe, so it's a
Mm-hmm.
lot cooler. I
Mm-hmm.
imagine the ocean, given the archipelago there, it tends to make more temperate temperatures, so you probably don't get to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure you get to freezing, but maybe not like super below freezing or whatnot there. So
No, I mean, I think that their winters are tumultuous, but you're not getting like your snow, you're not getting your freezes, maybe overnight. But if I'm trying to come up with a region where that will be the case, but because they're literally in the middle of the ocean, it kind of has its own like little climate. Because even if you were to go to like, the Greek islands or the Italian islands, you still have that influence from the continent itself, right? But because it's so remote,
right.
it has its own. I mean, maybe Tasmania, if you go to the other side of the country,
Okay.
the side of the world, where it's just like it's its own place. New Zealand, it's like it's warmer than the Azores are, but it's like you're thinking about like its own sort of like literally its own little island, and it's sort of like its own thing. But it is a UNESCO protected wine growing region, by the way, just like the
Very
Douro
cool.
is. So yeah.
Very nice. Fantastic.
Okay.
So this is a 2020, and I think that's one of the interesting things with all of the wines that we have here is all of these are definitely, what would be considered older vintages these days, but obviously they're still standing up, standing strong. Normally I know a lot of people, I'm sure a lot of what you do with Portuguese wines, especially on the white side, is education, because normally people hear Portuguese white, they probably think the Vinho Verdes, the real light, effervescent, heavy acidic, meant to be drunk young style of wines. But
Yeah.
this is showing beautifully for a 20. It's got a little bit of oxidation, a little bit of age, but it's blended in so well with it to provide a little more richness and nuttiness to the wine.
I just love how this wine, the savory aspect of it, because it's like, when I had those focus groups, what I realized is just how sweet the American palate is, right? So when we bring these wines that have more of a savory salinity, minerality, herbaceous qualities to it, you kind of wonder like, how are people going to receive these wines? Are they going to want more of the I can't tell you how many times I'm at a tasting. People are like, what do you have that's sweet? Nothing. I have things that have incredible fruit, but I have nothing that's sweet. So when I put something like this in front of someone, it's always sort of like, are they going to reject it, or are they going to find that it's just so incredibly different that that's interesting, but it's interesting in a good way, right? And it is a lot about education. And the only thing that I ask of people is just say yes to the experience. Again, you don't have to like it; it doesn't have to be a jam. But if you're open to trying something new, you may find something that you like. Like you might try this and be like, what other Azorean wines are out there? Or what are other island whites and reds are out there that I can try that have a similar profile, or just that are different enough that you can take to a dinner party, and you're not taking your usual Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Cabernet, right? Something really more interesting with a little more story. So I lean on that. I lean on the experiential part of things, where it's just like, just say yes to a tasting, and you may find something that you like.
I think what's interesting about this wine, because it does have, it does have more texture and body. It has a little more age. I don't know if that's what the grape tastes like younger. I'm assuming to a degree. And the minerality and the herbaceousness make perfect sense because it's grown on an island in volcanic soils, and volcanic soils equal minerality. But it does have a lot of acidity. It's not that bright, fresh acidity that you get in other, young white wines like a Vinho Verde that tickles your tongue. This just kind of sits back. You get that mouth watering at the end. That's the acidity that you're getting. So this wine is just filled with that intense acidity, even though it's not vibrant, it's intense.
Yeah, which I think that on a wine that's technically 4 years old, you're not really likely to find that kind of freshness. But I think that what this wine does is it knocks you off your rocker a little bit, because it's like whatever rules we were told about like age and acidity and freshness and how that plays, especially in the place from Portugal, where people even know where Portugal is in a map, that's a win. Because 5 years ago, people thought that Portugal was in South America. And I can tell you all the conversations that I had with people about that. Fortunately, people now actually kind of know maybe where it is. Some people still think it's part of Spain, which, okay, at least we are in the right area in the map.
They got the right peninsula.
They have the right, peninsula for sure. But if people even heard of Portugal and they heard of anything other than port, they probably heard of Vinho Verde. And Vinho Verde is like, my mission in life is like to let people know that Vinho Verde is a region first and style second. And in my portfolio alone, I have like 8 to 10 different SKUs just in Vinho Verde, and they're all wildly different. So when you have this idea that, a 2020 white wine can't retain this level of freshness, I think that this kind of knocks that thought on its head. And that's why I say, like, I encourage people to try something new and not be scared about something that, might break a rule that they may have heard however many years ago.
Do you know how this wine is made? Like, is there any leaf stirring? Is there any neutral oak? Is it all stainless steel, or is it
all stainless steel? I don't think there's any mallow here. It's just a straight up clean production. Because the Azores are still, of course, part of the European Union, they all operate under what they call the Integrated Production Management System, which is a long, fancy way of saying sustainable. So they're not like using harsh pesticides or herbicides, because they're already working with, temperamental climate and regions. So they're actually doing it as cleanly as possible. So no, it's just straight stainless steel, no leaf stirring, nothing of that. It's just, here's the grape, here's the salt, here's the ocean and the wind, here's the volcanic rock, and that's all you get, which I think is plenty in a wine like this.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful wine, and it shows tremendous character. I have, again, similar climate. I think of like Rias Baixas and the Albarino's coming out of there, but this has a lot more depth and richness to it. We always talk about food pairings here. So I would love for each of these wines, Sandra, for you to give us both a traditional Portuguese food item or dish that would pair with this, and then also something non-Portuguese that you think might pair with this.
So a couple of things. One, the Portuguese love to eat, so we build wine for food. Every time we're sitting down at the table having a meal, we're already thinking about what we're going to have on our next meal, right? So that's always the conversation. We build wine for food, so these wines are made to be paired with really any cuisine that you have in front of you. Like when I taste this wine, like I was telling Allison earlier, to me this is just like oyster, like seashells, like crushed up in your mouth. So of course, like we will gear towards, your seafood. We love our octopus in Portugal, and octopus you can have with white wine and red wine. I've seen a lot of red wine applications.
You really love your octopus as much as you love your codfish?
Yeah, the bacalao, the salted codfish, is kind of the
they say that there are 365 recipes for bacalao, one for every day of the year.
every day of the year. And you know what? I didn't realize the bacalao was as prominent in places like Mexico until like recently, right?
And northern Italy as well.
Yeah, I mean, and Spanish as well. So like those Western European countries for sure, but also some places in Latin America, of course, where the Spanish colonized, right? And all those things, Spanish and Portuguese. So good question, Chris. I think that codfish, bacalao, that's always going to be a North Star. And, but with the bacalao, I would have it a more like refreshing application. So for example, like one of the things that my mom loves to do that I love her to do is like once you've rehydrated the bacalao and you've gotten all the salts out of it or as much out of it as your taste desires, you can just shred it and have it on a salad with like onions and tomato and olives. That's it. Olive oil, you're done. God, it's an incredible salad. It's so simple but so delicious. And this one would absolutely go with that. On the flip side, I mean, obviously you can go eat sushi, you know, but with the herbaceousness of this wine, like my mind goes to Chinese chicken salad.
Oh,
that's where I go. Yeah, like that fresh, clean, citrusy kind of style. That's kind of like where I go with this as well. So
I know, Allison, you said you were having Vietnamese spring rolls with this earlier.
The wrapped one in rice paper with shrimp and all the herbs, and it was really nice. And I will be enjoying it later with my Vietnamese what is it,
banh mi?
Not banh mi. I have it on rice, but just the beef. Because
nice.
I think this can handle not a heavy like grilled meat, but I think it can handle meat. And I think let's see, Jennifer had it with carnitas burritos at dinner tonight and said it was very good. So there you go.
So my food suggestion for this one is really out of left field because it goes right into the heart of classical French cuisine. But I want this with escargot. I want the butter, the parsley, the richness, but also like the sort of heaviness of the escargot. I think with the acid and the richness of this wine, it would be an amazing pairing with an escargot.
More as a contract versus like a complementary per se.
That could be interesting because the acidity is not super bright that it'll cut through, but it might just.
Yeah, I don't think it has to be. That's the nice thing, is I think it's got enough acidity to really match with the garlic butter, the you know, the earthiness of the escargot. I think it would be fun. Plus the textures, since this is a wine with some body in it, I think having something that's a little fuller, a little chewier like an escargot would be really fun.
God, now I kind of want to go in that direction.
I know.
What's
I'm
my
like,
nearest,
where can I go get
French
escargot
restaurant
later? Yeah, and when you were talking about that salad with the bacalao and then put on, like my mind instantly went to ceviche. Like doing a bacalao ceviche would be fantastic. And I know Sabrina said the same thing with this work with my 3 citrus lobster ceviche. Absolutely, I think it would. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, especially the butteriness of the lobster, right? And the brininess of the dressing or of the sauce. I think it will be beautiful. But that's, I think, the beauty of wine for me is the fact that it's almost like a game. You know, it's just like, oh, what's fun? What can we have with this? You know, so that's what I love about wine.
Let's put it with some malasadas and see what happens. Exactly. Why not?
Might be a bit of a stretch, but why not?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
So let's move on to the Popa Reserva Bianco, the white, the Branco, I should say.
The Branco,
Portuguese for white. Yes, beautiful.
Yes.
So we have moved to the mainland. We are now in the Douro River Valley, which it's funny when you mention, you know, Vino Verde, Vino Verde. I feel like if this was 10, 15, maybe 20 years ago, and you mentioned Portuguese wines, it went to either Vinho Verde and Port. Like that was pretty much people's expressions of Portuguese wine. But it feels like in the last 15 years or so, the Douro Valley has just kind of exploded in terms of people's awareness. This idea of just fantastic wines, predominantly on the red side, coming out of there, great quality to value wines coming out of there. I've never had a white from the Douro. So tell us a little bit about this region and this wine.
So a few years ago, I went to this. I don't know if you guys, I think most of you know Ian Blackburn. We know him. He's actually my first teacher in wine here in LA. And he had a seminar where he flew in a guy from the Douro wine commission. And one of the things that he said that stuck with me all these years later is that the Douro Valley is one of the most hostile growing environments in the wine world. It's stunning, but
More
it's
so than
frigid
the
cold.
Azores.
Yes, because of the temperature variations between, summer and winter. So, Douro is in a place where we call the Alto Douro. There's Monte de Alto Douro, which in Portugal we call the cold country.
Okay.
So during the winter, it's frigid cold. You get your snow, you don't really get a whole lot of ice, but it's cold. In the summer, your temperatures are up there like in the 100+ degrees during harvest, right? So it's that variation that really makes it, a pretty incredible place to grow wine. But because it's kind of like the Mosel, right? Because the vineyards are such steep slopes that
Right.
when they were built and when they were actually dug up, they were done so by hand. You couldn't get machinery up there. You can't harvest by machine because you're going to go rolling down the hill and you're going to end up in the river, right?
Yeah.
So it
You've
has
got
to
to
be
use
done.
repelling equipment basically to do the harvest.
Yeah, so you're still using hand harvesting, and you have to do it during the day. Like in Napa, you can harvest at 4 o'clock in the morning, right? Because everything is flat. And again, you're not going to be tripping and falling down into the river. But in the Douro Valley, you can't do that. There is a region right next to the Douro, which is called Down. We call it a version of Burgundy, and they're right next to each other. And think of Down and the Douro the way that you do the Valley in LA and Santa Monica. So the Valley is Douro and Santa Monica is Down. So on the same day, you have a 15 to 20 degree temperature difference.
Wow.
Do you know how many times Eugenio has told me it's Down, the Down region?
No.
It's DAO, but
it's a silent M apparently there. Yes.
Not according to Eugenio.
No.
Or it's whatever the opposite of a silent M is. It's
no.
Yeah.
Think of going down the stairs. Think of like wearing a down jacket.
Down.
But with an M, he always tells me I'm wrong. It's an M. I'm like, oh.
Down.
Again, colloquial. I don't know where Eugenio is from.
He's
but,
from Brazil.
That doesn't count. But it doesn't count.
That's the diaspora.
But he is the Portugal brand ambassador, so.
Sure. So yeah, so that's interesting. But yeah, so like people pronounce it differently.
Who are you going to trust, a Brasileiro or a Portuguese from New Jersey? Come on.
Fair point. But I'm closer to Portugal.
No, I meant you. I meant you.
No, I know. But that's what I'm saying. Just like he comes from Brazil, he's probably like a couple of generations in. But it's fine, regardless. However you say it, go and visit and do all the things. So, but the Douro Valley, it's nothing but schist, right? It's a rock that is very easily breakable. So this is a region where your vines are absolutely struggling, There's very little irrigation, if any at all. So you get what you get when it comes to your precipitation. And these vines are allowed, their roots are allowed to really dig down into that minerality, into that rock to get whatever water they can from the river. And Douro is known to grow the grapes that go into ports. But a lot of people didn't realize that Douro is actually making still wines as well. So in the last 25 to 30 years, since Portugal became part of the European Union, at that point, that's when Portugal actually became much more focused on making wines that are more commercially viable, right? Up until then, Portugal was all over the place when it came to production. So if you were growing grapes, especially in the Douro region, if you had like type A, the best quality grapes, you had to go you had to sell your grapes to the major porthouses.
Okay.
Everybody else, you went to the co-ops, everybody into the same barrel, and God help you, whatever came out of that
It was
barrel.
basically like a giant co-op, more or less.
For sure. But once the European Union stepped in and they provided funds, they provided, an opportunity for people to actually make their own wine, that's when these producers started popping up. So white wine from the Douro Valley is not as well known because, in my experience, going to market with these wines, they're quite eclectic, right? It's like you can't really pinpoint like what is this wine, what is that aroma, because the varieties themselves are unknown. You have Viosinho, you have Social, you have Verdelho, you have Rabigato. These are all native varieties from the Douro Valley, but I can't tell you, okay, this is equal to that because you have it more in a blend. And in fact, actually, somebody just sent me a picture of a 100% Rabigato wine from the Douro Valley. It's like, I always saw it in the blend. I didn't realize people were making it as a mono variety. So you're starting to extrapolate some of these varietals and making, a mono varietal wine from these. But this is a region that tends to give you big opulent wines, but this producer is actually making a much more restrained style. So it's a lot more about the earth, the minerality, than it is about like the sun or the heat or the ripeness or even the oak that they use in these wines. Yes, this is a field blend, not field blend. So field blend is when you don't know. Yes, field blend is when you don't know what's in there.
So the blocks are separated and they're fermented separately and then blended together. That's not a field blend.
Yes.
Okay.
No. Well, and usually your field blends, at least for Portugal, for a lot of these older vineyards, field blends is just like you don't even know what's planted.
Right. You just throw everything in and guess the percentages.
Everything, correct. And
you can have a modern day educated field blend where you put it all in together, but you know your percentages because you know what vines are what.
Yeah, because you actually studied what was there, right? So a couple of years ago, I went to Douro Valley and had these incredible wines. And the winemaker, they took us to the vineyards and there was a plot of land. It was maybe like 100 square feet, right? Just that one little plot. He's like, we had this expert come in. He was like 80 years old, but he knows his grape varieties. So he came in and he plucked a leaf from every single vine. In that like 100 square feet, there were 40 different varieties. Oh. That's a field blend, right? Yeah. Now what Douro is doing,
it's like the old Acorn Vineyard.
Yeah, yes. But except Bill knows exactly what vine is what as you walk through it. He's like, this one's Cabernet, this one's Petit Cacao, this one.
But he knows it by the leaf. That was the thing, is he looks at the leaf and is like, this may look like Cinsault, but it's actually Petit Verdot or whatever.
Yeah. And I think that he actually did like DNA testing for some of them as well, right? So the strategy back in the day, or maybe it wasn't a strategy, I think it was more like sheer luck, to be honest, because again, we're very humble people. We weren't going to like wine classes and we didn't have master of viticulture. We do now, we didn't do back then. So when people sort of planted whatever they had available to them, what they ended up realizing is when you have this mishmash of these field blends, they actually protect each other, right? It's sort of like herd immunity, right? So if like one variety is really good at combating like mildew, but the one next to it is not, they actually protect each other. So that's sort of like the beauty of like these blind field blends. But what's happening now is that they're actually uprooting these unknown field blends to be much more specific as to what they're planting, especially Touriga Nacional, right? So in this white wine, you do have your usual, Verdelho is probably one of the most famous one because it's a variety that's being planted here in California.
And also other countries.
For sure. But I did learn recently that Verdelho and Verdejo are two different varieties.
Yeah, they are completely different. Yes.
Yeah, I just like, one's Portuguese, one's Spanish.
Right. No, it's not the Albarino.
It's not. It's not. Which, how anybody keeps all this straight in their head, I don't know how. But yeah. So this producer Popa, we represent what we call a new generation of winemakers and producers. So these are people that started their companies or wineries within the last 15 to 20 years. These are not the OGs. These are not people that have been working since like 80s, 90s, 70s, and beyond. So this is a brother and sister team. And the winery was actually bought by their grandfather. And the term of endearment that they had for grandpa was Popa, right? Just like you have Nonna in the Italian culture, Poppy. So Popa was for them. But also on the label, there's this bird that has this really fun pompadour. That's also a Popa, right? So it's very much like an honor of grandfather and land. So they are true to land as possible. So these wines are vegan. They don't overcomplicate. They really want to highlight the minerality and the varieties themselves. So you're not going to have, even though there's oak in this wine, it doesn't slap you. It's not offensive oak as you would find in some regions, right? So it's more there for like texture. It's not there to really give like those big vanilla notes per se. But even the oak that they use here, I feel it's more like neutral oak, not necessarily toasted oak. So you get a lot more minerality, a lot more of like that earthiness than you would, let's say, like those really big punchy fruit notes up front.
The minerality is outstanding on this one.
Yeah,
it's amazing. I have to ask you, how do you find these wineries or come to select who you want to work with? Again, I imagine there's lots of producers out there, but how do you discover these wines and discover these stories and these families?
It depends. It depends what I'm looking for, and depends how I found them. And for each producer, I have a different story. These guys I found because one of my clients was just like, oh my God, we went to this winery and their wines were just incredible. We would love to get them here. I'm like, all right, let me go investigate. So that's how I found these guys. I have a white port. I have a client that was asking me for a white port. And he's like, the white ports that are here, they're not really great. We want something else. So I'm like, okay. So I try to find producers here first. I try to like research producers in Portugal that I can contact and be like, hey, send me samples. The Portuguese way of working, there is zero urgency to anything. They don't answer emails. They don't call you back. So I literally had to get on a plane and I had to fly to Portugal and I had to go to Douro and I had to enter into like these tiny little shops and be like, I'm looking for white port, but a white port that doesn't come from the big houses.
Right.
I want someone who's small, but that has history. And they're looking at me, they're like, we don't know who they are. But there was this young lady, she was very, very helpful. She's like, look, if you go around the corner and you go up the hill, there's a green door, you knock there, and that's the producer XYZ. I'm like, okay. So here I am blindly going up these like rustic like streets. And I'm like, here I am an American, right? And there's already a certain perception of Americans going to these other countries. And I'm just showing up. And I'm just like, hi, I am Sandra from the United States, and I'm an importer, and I'm looking for white port. I'm literally knocking on these people's doors and looking at me like I'm crazy. They're like, okay, well, let me get you somebody. So if that's what I have to do to find the one that I'm looking for, that's what I do. Traditionally, if there are wine fairs, for example, that's where I go. And I'm like, okay, let's say I'm looking for a sparkling. I have a sparkling. I spent about a year looking for a sparkling. I went when these big wine fairs were happening. And I happened to see one of my producer. I'm like, Carlos, I'm looking for a sparkling. Who do you know? What do you got? He's like, I got you. Grabs me by the hand, goes down the hall. He's like, this guy right here. He was like 5-0, but he's one of like the top somms in Portugal. He's like, he knows his stuff. Ask him. Great. Hey, Rui, this is what I'm looking. He's like, oh, I got you. Grabs my hand again. These men love to grab hands. And he guided me up to the second floor. And he's like, this guy, this specific guy is who you need. I'm like, great. And sure enough, I bring the stuff in and it's a hit. So it really depends, but really comes down to
a lot of word of mouth, it sounds like.
A lot of word of mouth. You have to knock on doors, but also you have to respect the culture where it's just like, this isn't just business. It's just like, I'm here representing you. I'm here as a Portuguese woman and I want to do right by you. So tell me what's good. And but yeah, so it's a different tactic depending on what I'm looking
Absolutely.
for. Yeah.
And what's for a lot of these, what's their case production? Is it, is it small? Is it like 1,000? Is it 5,000? Is it 10,000? Or does it vary kind of across the
It
board?
really varies. Like the first guy, for example, the Pico wines, I don't think that they make more than like 10,000 bottles a year. I mean, they're
Okay.
really, really small.
Yeah.
These guys, the Popas, they're a little bigger, but if you're still in maybe like your 30 to 50, if that. We don't really work with really big ones. Our third wine, they're a little bigger. They actually have a much bigger production, but they're still, for the most part, in the boutique style of production. We're not talking millions of bottles at all.
And then I have to ask, within the Douro, since I'm just so unfamiliar with white wines coming out of there, are the white vines, are they planted closer to the river, higher up on the slope? Is there a particular location for those vines, or is it just really kind of willy-nilly?
A lot of willy-nilly. Again, when the Portuguese were before they decided to take themselves seriously, they was just like, this is a piece of land. I can plant a vine. I'm going to plant a vine, right? So, like you would think, like, oh, could there ever be, botrytis, for example, grown in the Douro River, right?
Right.
Could be an experiment. Has somebody tried it? I don't know. But I don't think there's necessarily a strategy. I think that some of the major producers, especially the major Douro houses, port houses, they might have more of a actual like, okay, your temperatures are going to be cooler here. We're going to plant here.
Right.
But a lot of these like mom and pop shops, they're just like, we have land,
They
we want to
plant
plant,
wherever they can. Yeah.
we plant wherever we can. Yeah.
Nice. And it's mostly, I mean, it's terraced vineyards there along the hillside,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
still very steep, but not just vertical
No.
rows going down to the.
No,
It's
you
very
actually have.
steep.
Yeah, it's very
terraces.
steep, but you do have your terrace, which helps with erosion and actually allows you to work. So at least they've thought of that. So yeah.
You know the joke. It's like the Mosel, and it's like
Côte Rôtie.
Oh, I was thinking in Italy the
Alto Adige? I don't
no,
know.
no. Oh my God, I'm blanking, but it's along the coast as you get into the 5 towns, but it's I'm just blanking.
Ligurian
anyway,
coast.
There are all the places where, if you notice, all the people are uneven-legged. One's higher than the next because when they plant and they pick,
they favor one side
like
of
they are in the U.S.
Yeah.
I've not heard that joke, but
that's hysterical.
I like it.
So
what are people with all the didn't mean to interrupt, but what are people picking up on this one? I mean, I see the question here.
Sandra's doing research now, so throw your
am.
comments into the chat.
I think it's got some nice kind of slightly ripe pineapple on the finish, but the minerality is sort of the overpowering. I mean, little hints of kind of little like slightly floral, slightly citrus notes in the back, but.
So what bacalao recipe would you pair with this? And then what would be your non-Portuguese?
Fried bacalao, because this has acidity.
That's true.
I was going for an oven roasted in like olive oil bacalao. It's because we love our olive oil with the bacalao. So that's kind of like where they also have one dish is a creamy dish. They call it bacalhau con natas. Natas is like it's cream, heavy cream. So something like really creamy like that, I think will really work. Again, the opposite. God, where would I go with this?
Oh, something like a buttered fish, like a Dover sole.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, even just like classic fish and chips would be fantastic with that, given the minerality.
But I also like linguine and clams. Like that's where kind of like where I go as well, right? Which I think will also be like pretty traditional, right?
Right.
What about those things they love to eat in like Madeira? Is it the barnacles?
Yeah, the barnacles, I think is what they're called. God, those are tiny little suckers, huge in the Douro Valley for sure.
Like cockles or whatnot.
No, they kind of look like little alien hands.
They look
They're
like little
sort of
alien
this-
claws,
Mm.
and you
Yeah,
pop
they're
it
like
out, and you.
this big.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Well,
What are they
Sabrina,
called?
Sabrina
they
says
kinda
brown
grow-
buttered stuffed sole, which
Yeah,
sounds
exactly.
delicious.
I'm with you, Sabrina. That's what yeah. But what are they called? The percebes.
Oh, percebes. Yeah.
Percebes.
Percebes. Yeah. And they
Percebes.
grow the way that would like a mussel wood or clam wood, or like they kind of grow like on
Yeah,
the
like a
rocks
bivalve
of the
kind of
river.
thing. Nice.
Correct.
Um,
I mean, listen, if you all want to have like dinner, and I will bring wine. So
all right,
just
we may arrange that for later in the year.
please.
I do want to. I got a separate text. I have to ask the question because Stacy was asking about the rosé. She's intrigued by the rosé and wants to know a little bit more. Is it a dry style rosé? Is it done in like the Provençal style, or how is that rosé from the Azores produced?
It is a dry style rosé. Let me show it to you actually.
There you go, Stacy. Stopping the entire conversation just for you.
So I don't know if you can tell because my
Yeah.
light is kind of bright, but there's a woman in a ribbon, right? Holding herself. This is a 2021, but it still has a lot of the minerality. Again, stainless steel. It's a really nice, like peachy color almost, but it's not. It's totally a dry wine. But yeah, very much like a clean stainless steel style. Almost like a Provençal for sure.
Nice. And Sabrina is offering to, if you come up to Sonoma, she will swap wine for food with you. So
I will travel for wine and food.
Sabrina also makes fantastic
Done.
cocktails. So you've got that working for you as well.
So party at your place? Listen,
Party
there
at
tomorrow.
Sabrina's. And if you stay on a
Yes.
Sunday, she and her husband always do Irish coffee Sundays. So
we need to become friends, Sabrina.
clearly.
You're Silva. Are you Portuguese?
Her grandfather.
Yeah.
Grandfather.
She
Okay.
put
So
that
I
up
think
in
you're
the
like
chat.
okay, I may have missed it, but yeah, it's Silva is very much Silva to us is kind of like a Smith almost, right? It's very popular stuff.
Jennifer also says she would travel for wine and food too, but LA would be amazing.
Would be
so if we do
yeah.
set up a dinner,
Come on
yes,
down.
absolutely. She's buying tickets right now. So
okay, we'll
Perfect.
work on that.
we will.
Well, you'll
we'll-
have to stay
we'll
tuned
find.
because Sandra just completed this past week Portuguese Wine Week, which will come
Yes.
next year for Portuguese Wine Week. But
Yes.
Yeah. So before we move
yeah.
into the red wine here, the Herarde del Albernas.
That's Albernas.
Yes. Herarde, excuse me. Let's talk a little bit about Portuguese Wine Week because that's part of the reason why we're holding the tasting today is because you were so busy with all of the events. So what is Portuguese Wine Week? How did it come about and how were you involved?
Show of hands, how many of you have heard of Prosecco Week or Cava Week? Half of you. Okay.
I make Prosecco, so I'm sort of guilty for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Guilty, your honorable mention.
you don't make Prosecco, you make a Prosecco style.
I do make a
It's like
Prosecco style
champagne.
wine. Thank you.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
it's like port.
Yes.
And it is a no-no to all the people in Livermore, Lodi, and everywhere else that make port wines to call it port.
Listen, this is America. We're free to do as we wish. So do your
We do what we want.
as you wish. Okay.
You don't call Parmesan cheese, Parmesan,
We shoot first and ask questions later. We stand our ground. Go ahead.
But there's like people in California making California port, and that
I know several of them. Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
first of all,
most regions have made a deal not to use those terms. Certain regions have refused to sign the reciprocal agreement of respecting territories.
Yes.
because the Portuguese are not as aggressive as the French are.
No,
We're much
they
more
also call it champagne, and they have refused to play the international respect game.
I'm surprised that the champagne lords haven't like come out mafia
stopped
style.
Cooks or Andre
Yeah.
from calling it champagne. Anyway, we're getting off
Anyway,
track. Let's talk about
all the way off track.
Portuguese
Okay.
Wine Week. Yes.
Portuguese Wine Week. Okay, so basically, Cava, Spain, Prosecco, Italy, both of those two countries have, their own independent weeks. So they have Cava Week and Prosecco Week, where nationwide there's a promotion for Cava Prosecco, right? So you can go into a restaurant and you can have a flight for that week, or you go into a bottle shop and you can have a tasting. So I was like, it'd be cool to do something like that here, but for Portuguese wines, and we're not necessarily just designated to like port or Vinho Verde or wine from like one particular region. And basically what I want to do is just bring an awareness to Portuguese wine. And when I reached out to clients to say, hey, why don't we do a week where we promote Portuguese wines? They don't even have to be mine. It could be somebody else's Portuguese wines. The only thing that I want to do is just create awareness around the region and the fact that these wines are here. And people have been really excited about finding these wines, because a lot of people don't realize that Portugal even makes wine, right? So we're just trying to sort of like, again, knock on people's doors and be like, hey, we have some fun stuff. So I created a week where I went to my clients, whether they're bars or restaurants, and we had them participate. We also did a sip and sale on Saturday, because we have Portugal, of course, historically was the leader in the exploration age before the Brits came along. And I wanted to sort of pay homage to that, where it's just like, let's get on a boat, pretend we're circumnavigating the world, and drinking some fabulous wine and like learning about these great wines. So that was incredibly fun. I also had a lunch, VIP lunch, in a fabulous Hollywood location right by the Hollywood sign. It was just magic. And again, just a way to showcase how these wines compare, not just with Portuguese food, but in this particular lunch, it was with Californian food, very healthy California food as well, because I wanted to drive home the fact that these wines are so versatile, regardless of what you're having with them. But to me, it was just like, hey, we're here, come out and have a glass, learn all the things. So whether it's tastings or educations or webinars, it was a week to celebrate, and second year, and we grew from last year. So once I've hibernated long enough and my bones stop hurting, I will get back to planning again, because I'm a one-woman circus act where I do all the things myself. So hopefully next year I'll see your pretty little faces in Portuguese Wine Week, year 3. So and it was literally just me. It was just me. So I'm hoping to get more people on board, and I actually try to work with Allison, but I couldn't stretch my $3.50 that I had to incorporate her. So I hope to find $10 next year to give to her. So
Allison is very, her services are very expensive, I understand.
They are. So
she charges
as she should. Know your value, know your worth.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So yeah. Okay.
Perfect. So let's talk about the Herarde das Albernas.
Albernas.
A fun wine, and you kind of spoiled it earlier by revealing that Aragonés in Portuguese is the name for Tempranillo.
But specifically,
nobody remembered.
No,
so
that's true.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been drinking.
It's true. It's okay. There will be no test at the end of this. Everybody is welcome to forget, and I have to
say, as a wine consumer, but also as a retailer back in the day, one of the things I really appreciate is you putting your own importer sticker on here that shows the grape content on here, because too many times, the European producers, they don't show what the blend is or what the grapes are. And that's one of the first questions that consumers always ask. So having that in the percentages is just so helpful.
So I'm about to get really boring here, and I'm sorry, but that's actually a legality. So as an importer, so one label, this is technically your front label, right? This is where you get all your information, right?
Yeah, if wherever the alcohol percentage is technically the front label.
Right, even though we technically consider this the front because that's what we look at, right? But In the brand label, if you are listing the varieties, you have to list the percentages. Whereas if it's just red wine and it doesn't say what is in that red wine, then you don't have to list the percentages. So because the producer, and here's the thing, I do not ask producers to make wine for the market. I bring wine that exists as one in Portugal and bring it here as is. There's a few brands that I know most of us have seen in the Costco's and the big markets that
Trader Joe's
are Portuguese wine, yeah, but they do not exist as wine brands in Portugal because those were made specifically for the American market. So those are going to be your riper, your higher sugar content kind of wines. Whereas I actually go look for wines that exist as wine in Portugal and bring them here. So I don't make wine for America. I bring wine to America.
So my Cristiano Ronaldo CR7 Red is not a actual winery.
Probably not.
Sorry,
I'm sure it's like
that's a soccer joke.
But you know what? God, you know what? It will be smart, but he doesn't drink. So,
Fair.
But then again, neither does Jennifer Lopez, and she has an entire wine brand. But that's neither here nor there. So, okay, this wine. Do we know what Herarde means?
We do not. Educate us.
Okay. This is a Quinta.
Mm-hmm.
This is Herarde. So, in basically anywhere from like your center of the country north, every estate is a Quinta because basically it says that you have yay much space to make wine. Everything in the south, an estate, is an Herarde because Herarde basically tells you just how big and wide and vast the fields are. But because you have more land, more accessibility to land in the south of Portugal, then your estates are going to be called Herardes. Anything in the north, an estate is called a Quinta. So this is basically indicating the fact that they're in South Portugal, but also this is a much bigger estate that you would find in the north. So just a fun fact.
Interesting. So it's basically just a regional name for an estate, but it's
correct.
Quinta in the north and Herarde in the south.
Yeah, and basically more indicative to like size, because if you think about the Douro Valley, you don't have vast, areas of land that you can plant, but you can do that in the south, you have rocks and mountains to contend
I guess
with.
it would be like a ranch in the west versus an estate on the east coast, or a compound.
Yeah, something to that effect. So this is a family winery, but it's probably the biggest producer that we have, and they actually have quite a large production of all the things. They're pretty diverse. They make quite a bit of oil. They make enough olive oil that it goes to Italy, and then Italy repackages it as its own.
Of course they do.
Of course they do. Italy.
A lot of argan oil in those olive oils too.
Yeah, there's a lot of shenanigans happening in Europe and everywhere. But they also have almond trees. They have hogs and cattle and an incredible organization, right? So the company is called Sociedade Agrícola do Encosta do Guadiana. That's the official name. Their wine brands is Passo do Conde and the Albernas. This is more like their entry level wines, which to me, these wines, I call this wine Portugal in a glass because it's rustic, but it has really great fruit. But when you go to Portugal and you go to a traditional restaurant and you order their house red, this is the kind of style that you get. It's a lot more earthy with that sort of like those really ripe red and black fruits in the background, but you get a lot of that like earthiness, very much up front, a little bit of that Portuguese funk as well. And so to me, this reminds me of like what wine was like in my grandfather's time, right? What they were drinking basically every day.
It's still very clean though. It's rustic, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not
barnyard, which is nice.
It's not barnyard, correct. But it's just earth. It's just earthy, and it's just like rocks and soil and granite and forest and pine trees. It's a lot of that. but very much, fruit as well. And actually this winery, so we were part of the Sommelier Choice Awards and we sent quite a few wines, and this winery actually won top wine for Portugal for the year, and they actually bested some of the bigger, more commercially well-known wineries that were part of the competition. So we're very proud of that. So the estate itself, the Herarde, has been in operation or in existence since the late 1300s.
Wow.
It has belonged to the Castelo Branco family for over 300 years, but the actual company was incorporated in 1928 as a wine producing company. So it doesn't necessarily fall into a new generation, but it kind of does, because they haven't been around for as a wine producer for hundreds of years. It's still family run. It's their third generation kids running the show. And I think they're doing a pretty incredible job. They're certified sustainable. And again, all the producers fall under that integrated production management system, but they specifically have the sustainability stamp and certificate from Europe. And these ones are also vegan. So they're clean. They're not using any harsh pesticides or herbicides, but they're very cautious as to how they make their wines for sure. Traditional varieties, you have your Alicante Bouschet, which technically is a French grape, but in true Portuguese fashion, we point to things and we say, "You're mine now." So we call Alicante Bouschet ours. It's not, but it's ours now. Trincadeira is another variety in here, and that is a very antique Portuguese varietal that's used always almost as a blend. That you have Toriga Nacional, which is our big red grape, which I'm very excited about, and then Aragonés, which is Tempranillo in the south. So I believe there's 12 months of oak in this one, but it's just very, very well integrated, and I think it's just this is your average Wednesday or Thursday night wine. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It has an incredible sense of place.
No, and that's
Andy said it's good with pizza.
Yeah.
It really is. It really, really is.
Well, and what's shocking to me is this is a pizza wine that's great on a Tuesday or Wednesday, but it's a 2019. I mean, you've got 5 years of age on this, and it's holding up so well, just nicely balanced. You're not getting much oxidation or age on it. I mean, even the color is still, very purple. Maybe there's just a little orange tones on the lip, but it's just fresh and lively and still holding up quite nicely.
Yeah, and whenever you guys go to Portugal, because I know you will, if you haven't yet, I know you will, because everybody and their brother is going. And every time I come back from Portugal, I'm always sitting next to somebody who just bought something there, because of course they did.
Yeah.
So when you go and you order a house red anywhere you go, it's going to feel very much like this. So this is why I call it Portugal in a glass, because it's very much authentic to who they are and what the country is about.
Beautiful.
Okay.
No, this wine is it's delicious, and yeah, it's just a beautiful sort of light everyday red wine. It's it's one of those that I think if you put it in front of most sophisticated wine people, they'd have no idea. They'd not be able to pick this out as a Portuguese wine. They might get the Iberian Peninsula, but I think it's not it doesn't scream Portugal, which I think is very nice. So
okay.
Yeah.
Great. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns?
Beautiful. How about food pairings with this one?
So we already said pizza, right?
We did. Yes, that's our non-traditional. How about our Portuguese? Because I know the Portuguese love to mix meat and seafood together in their dishes and their.
This is the red one that you can have a bacalao, especially one that's cooked in a tomato base.
Yeah.
Right. With maybe some broccolini and potatoes, always potatoes, right?
It always comes down to the bacalao.
It always comes down to the bacalao. But also it's just we love our meat. So where my family is from in the north, we're very well known for our cattle, for our beef. So your beef stew, your goat stew, I think it could really your game meats. You know, you can also have. So those are very like traditional Portuguese plates, dishes, and this is one that I probably also have with an octopus, especially if it's like a stewed octopus and like
Yeah,
in a
or
more like
grilled.
rustic, robust, yeah, sauce. So yeah, it just pairs really well with a
Yeah.
number of
No,
cuisines. Okay,
it's a beautiful light red wine and very
yeah,
delicious. And
yeah,
that's a nice transition over to our last wine of the night, since we are
yeah.
steadily approaching the 8 o'clock hour. So this is
Oh, we
the
are.
Popa Tinto, but that's okay. We're having so much fun.
Sandra, it
Nobody's
goes
dropped
by
off.
quickly.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
And your
Okay.
bones will hurt tomorrow as well from having gone
They
through
really
this.
will.
So we're sorry.
She was really nervous about talking for this long, and clearly she's not having trouble.
I was gonna say I got to have the booth next to you at what was the event, Allison, in downtown Santa Monica?
Vintage Hollywood.
Yes, at Vintage Hollywood last
Yeah.
year.
Hmm.
And you were the Energizer Bunny. You just kept going and going and going at that event. So
Really? Because
yeah,
as an introvert,
you are
I'm
not an
just
introvert.
like, I listen, I will hide for 3 days after this, I guarantee you.
If you are, you're a charismatic introvert, is what you are.
Well, thank you. I
You're welcome.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so now we're at
Introverts can be extroverts. They just need to replug in and.
I found a great term today, not to get, but it's called otrovert, which is basically somebody who's always kind of been an outsider, who doesn't like to join in things and whatnot, but still people are drawn to you, and you know, are fine public speaking and just being in front of folks. So
Well, you know what's interesting is that I grew up with this complex where I always thought that like people don't want to hear from me. People don't want to hear what I have to say. So I will always walk into a room and I'd be like, "Woo, woo." But then when I start talking to people, it's just like I said earlier in the call, I talk a lot. I don't realize that I'm talking a lot. So, but when we're having fun, when at least I'm having fun, and
you're
you
the
all look like
Cristiano
you're having a good time.
Ronaldo of wine importing is what you are.
I'm going to quote you on that. I'm
Please
going to
do.
like
Yeah.
put it in a billboard,
Yeah.
and hopefully Christian doesn't come after me for like, you know,
No,
copyright
because it's
infringement
an
or something like that.
analogy. You're not using his in
Yeah.
the branding. Yeah, perfect. All
No.
right, so let's talk about
Okay.
the Popa Reserve, the 2020 Douro Red, our final wine of
Yes.
the night.
Yes. Okay, so Touriga Franca, Touriga Nacional are two of the varieties. It's kind of like what I call like our version of Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc, right? And then you have Tinta Roriz, which is Tempranillo,
Yes.
and Tinta Count,
the big red dog.
the big red dog. That's right. And again, very traditional varieties in the region. And I think that your Douro Reds probably much more popular than your Douro Whites, but there's still an incredible level of minerality here, a lot of really ripe fruit. But again, clean, right? Not like over oaked, not over processed, not overworked. Vegan, you still get a lot of that, like a lot of the minerality, a lot of the shiftiness, and the true sense of place. But this is what your port varieties make in a still wine, in a non-port application, right? And I think that that's the aha moment for a lot of people, where they realize, wait, these grapes also make, not only do they make port, but they also make red wine that you can have with a variety of foods. Absolutely, you know, and I put these wines in front of people before. They're like, oh, it kind of tastes like port. It doesn't taste like port. Like maybe the fruitiness, but yeah, same varieties, you know. So again, I think that this is a wine that's indicative of where it's grown, and it's really showing you more the soil. It's showing more of these varieties, and not so much like the oakiness and like the overripeness of the fruit. So I think it's very clean. I think it's very nice.
I think there's something you said earlier when I think with the first one when you were talking about food, is that, you know, you make wines for food. And I think these are really good examples, whites, but especially the red, of wines that are really just food friendly, that very applicable to go with a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
Good acidity to balance food, nothing to overpower, nothing out of whack, you know, that's going to dominate. Just really drinkable wines to enjoy with your meal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, even though they do want food, I still enjoy them as is. You know, I'm an every occasion drinker, right? Because that's how I grew up. I grew up in a culture where wine was at the table all the time. So to us is like your cousin was there. Because of course, you know, whether it was a Wednesday afternoon or a Sunday night, wine had to be at the table. It didn't matter the occasion. It's just like your average Wednesday. I remember my grandfather coming home from working at the factory, and as soon as he came home, he washed up and he brought out his bread and cheese and his prosciutto and his wine. And you didn't need to have a reason why. You didn't have to have a birthday. It was just like there was something wrong if wine was not at the table. It's just like, what's happening? Who's dying? Are you sick? What's going on? Right. So for us, we drink wine regardless of whether it was built for food or was built to have on its own. We just drink it. Like we don't complicate it. It's just there. You know, it's just like water. So
No, this reminds me of, so one of the greatest meals I ever had was in Porto. And it was in a tiny little restaurant that was recommended by my hotel down at the base underneath one of the big bridges there. And nobody there spoke English, but we were able to, you know, communicate. And basically I sat down and they kind of pointed some stuff on the menu and I said, sure. And they brought out a pitcher of white wine at the time. It might have been a Vinho Verde. I'm not sure. It was definitely higher in acid. But then they just kept bringing out courses, which was amazing, and just putting food in front of me. And then at some point, the red pitcher got or the white pitcher got replaced with the red pitcher, and they brought out like either pork or lamb chops, and just again, just more courses, more courses. I probably had like 12 or 13 courses. They just kept bringing stuff out. And I think this was in the pre-Eurozone days, but I think the whole thing cost me the equivalent of like $30 or $35. It was just astounding.
Yeah.
And I still remember it to this day. And that was, you know, gosh, that was 2001. So that was 24 years ago.
Yeah. I think that whole meal will probably cost you closer to maybe like 40 or 45 euros. I mean, things are still incredibly reasonable.
It might have been that. I just remember it. So how cheap it was and so delicious. Yes.
And you know, you still can find that value in Portugal. I was talking to my mom the other day. My parents are fully retired and they went back home to their little village in northern Portugal, and she's like, no, things are becoming so much more expensive. But in comparison to what we're finding here in America, I mean, like you can't go out to eat for less than 100, like 75, $100 a person with maybe a glass of wine.
And that's
and that's on the low end right now.
That is on the low end.
Box.
That's right. But for that, you can have a 4-course Michelin star meal in Portugal, right? Even though things have gone up, as they should, you know. But yeah, I mean, like this wine, it reminds me of, you know, also going to these tiny little places in like downtown Douro, and the meal that comes up for me, which I don't know how people are going to feel about this, and pardon me if this is not something that you enjoy, because I can't imagine that you
We've
do.
already talked about octopus, so at this point you can't offend people too much.
There's this one dish that my father absolutely loves, but my mother calls it poison because it's just so rich. It's a bean dish. It's called feijoada. So it's beans, sausage, and tripe.
Oh.
So it's organ meat, right?
Yeah.
But it's rich and saturated and fatty and like earthy, and this will go so well with that because it's the complexity and the acidity. I think that will also give you sort of that like clean palate, but also add like a punch of savoriness to a dish like that. So that is my very traditional Portuguese dish that people won't have here. But if you're not turned off by the ingredients and you get to be in Portugal,
I
try
was
it.
I was worried you were going to throw out veal. That's what was going to offend people. But tripe, I don't think anybody's worried about tripe around here.
Really?
Yeah.
Veal? Like I love veal, and I feel like that's much more like accessible and acceptable than like intestines.
Not acceptable. Accessible maybe, but not acceptable. But that's all right. So Patty and David are getting a
It's
little bit of
not 1985 where people are walking around with pictures of the poor little,
well, it kind of
calves
is. I
in
mean, you're
their
not wearing your
cages.
chinchilla fur stole out to go get your veal scallopini and your your braised otter or whatever it is. David and Patty picked up a little bit of smokiness on this. I know the Popa Reserve had some oak on it. Does this have oak as well?
Yeah, I believe there's 12 months of oak in this one. And like so the Portuguese, they don't use oak for the sake of like we want this big punchy like oak flavor. It's more for structures, more for balance, more to like round out the tannins and the flavor profile. Whereas, in a newer world, a California type, that oak would be very present.
Right.
For us, it's just more like we want the hint of we want that roundness and that seductiveness that oak can give you without being overpowering. But can you find overly oak wines in the Douro region? Absolutely. But that's where I think that these guys excel because they're actually creating these wines that are much more restrained. I think they're much more subtle in their use of oak.
Absolutely. No, this is delicious. And I did want to double click on one thing. You mentioned that, Touriga Nacional and Touriga Franca are kind of the Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc of the Douro. I'm interested Touriga Franca because it's the grape that I'm not as familiar with. Does it have elements of Cabernet Franc? Like, are there some greener notes to it? It has the Franca name, so I assume there's some origin in France to it, or how did it come to be?
I would venture out to say that this actually has no connection to the French variety. I do the comparison in terms of just like placing the grapes in a quadrant that people might be able to understand, right?
Okay.
So Cabernet Franc is more the like that freeness appeal. So, you do have the structure of the Touriga, but in the Franca you have more just like the subtle fruit notes versus like the Touriga Nacional is going to be more punchy, is going to be like more well structured, right? So when you have those two together, you have sort of that balance of acidity and fruit with that big complexity that Tourigas are going to give you. And fun fact about Touriga Nacional, it is absolutely a variety that one you're seeing here in the United States, you're also seeing in other countries as well.
Absolutely.
It was approved to be part of the Bordeaux blend back in 2021.
Right.
It is a heat-loving variety, and it has tiny, tiny berries. And in fact, one of my producers has this picture of a bowl of Touriga Nacional grapes with a little ladybug. And I thought it was like, oh, this is a picture about sustainability and how clean and wonderful they are. No, that was for size. Like these berries are as small as a little ladybug. Like that's how tiny they are. But it's heat loving, thick skinned. And I think that this variety is going to be what's going to take us into the world of climate change. You're going to see it a lot in a lot of blends because of its acidity, because it's like as we start to move into warmer climates, higher temperatures, a lot of these varieties that are being grown now and all over the world, the the balance that a wine grower has to find is in the ripeness and the acidity of the vine. And when they're at peak, that's when you harvest, and that's when you have a really well balanced wine. As things start to get warmer, that balance is going to be, that threshold is going to be so much shorter that you almost miss it. So you
your
need
harvest
something
window shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. Yes.
very much so. And I think that Touriga Nacional, because that's the reason it was approved for Bordeaux. And I think that it's going to be one that people are going to be leaning on heavily going forward, just to be able to have that acid sugar component to allow you to actually have wines that you can drink and that you can age.
Yeah. No, I know years ago when I was up in Lodi for the Wine Bloggers Festival, my little tour went to a winery called San Jorge,
Hmm.
which is growing all Portuguese varietals. And they had Trincadeira, Tinto Cal, Touriga
Hmm.
Franca planted there. And it was a revelation as to how well those grapes did in an environment like Lodi, with its heat, even though it does get a little bit of diurnal shift and some of the maritime influence from the delta. But
Hmm.
yeah, I can absolutely I've seen I remember, when I started my wine shop in 2011, I felt like there were a fair amount of places that were doing Touriga Nacional in California, similar to Tempranillo, seemed to be kind of on the rise, and it never quite took off. But I could see
Yeah.
how as climate change hits California and we get warmer and warmer, more places will start planting those reds that can sustain in a warmer environment, but maintain the richness, the acidity
Yeah.
that people want.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And, and that's the reason that these varieties do so well in the Douro Valley, because it's such a hostile growing environment, right? Because it's
Yeah.
so hot. You literally are harvesting these grapes when it's 100 degrees outside. So, you know, they're big and punchy, and I think that they're going to be the wave of the future. And you absolutely are going to start to see more of it as a monovarietals and blends outside of Portugal for
Hmm.
sure.
Yeah.
I think in Bordeaux, it kind of it's going to make up about maybe 10% of the blend.
Yeah.
But again, you're going to start to see it,
And it's
on the
going to be one of
labels.
those it'll be from the bottom up, where it'll start with the not as prestigious producers who are looking for more of the heat, who are doing more bulk wines, looking for more heat resistant varietal. But it it
Right.
it will eventually work its way up, I imagine.
I think so. I think so as well, for sure.
Nice.
Okay. I
Well,
love I love the recommendations, Jennifer. Thank you. Yes, we are with Vintage Eats in Studio City. They actually participated in Portuguese wines this week. Thank you very much. Chris at the Wife and the Sum, I've been trying to get a meeting with them for like 2 years. So
His problem is he doesn't respond to emails anymore. He used to be much
right.
more responsive in the day, but they're busy.
But listen, I get it. It's like you get like 15 emails an hour trying to get people to come in. But no, these are great recommendations, Jennifer. Thank you very much.
And Jennifer,
yes.
I'm in LA, but I'm in the Central Coast a lot.
So as we kind of wrap things up here, Sandra, what are some of the takeaways about Portuguese wines that you want people to know or be able to take away from this, and kind of help spread the word for you?
You're starting to see these wines more and more on your restaurant menus and also on the shelves. So the next time that you go out to a restaurant, to a bar, and you see a Portuguese wine on the menu, try it. Give it a try. See how you feel. Okay. Because
There's
I'm
a chance
getting
it could
this
be her
answer.
wine.
Well, not only that, not necessarily that, because one, it opens up the opportunity for me to come in. Because the one thing that I'm always hearing, but I'm hearing it less and less, is my buyers at the wine shops or the restaurants saying people aren't coming in here asking for Portuguese wines, which I understand. This is California. Like, I understand that I'm bringing sand to the beach, right? But like I said at the beginning of this call,
It's really
the
good
only
sand.
thing, it's very good. It's very, very good sand.
Yeah.
And it's just like you need something that's a little different. You need diversity. But
Sometimes you need a brown sand to match the white sand.
correct. It's just like it's fun. It's different. You can always go back to your regular sand, but try the sand. But I think that people are going to continue to be surprised by the quality level of these wines. And especially at a time where we're at now, where people are worrying about, the economy and tariffs and all the things, how is this going to affect, my life? So Portuguese wines are always going to be great value wines. I sell these wines on my website, but I don't have anything on there. My most expensive wine is a Grande Reserva winemaker selection, like top of the top line. It's like $49. But everything else is between your $15 and your $25. So it's always going to be an incredible value. So if you're in a position where it's like, I want something that's fun, approachable, but it's not going to kill my wallet, go Portugal, right? And always try something new. If you love it, ask where you can get a bottle. And if you don't, it's okay. You can move on to something else. But we're a culture of sharing. We just want to share all the things. We want to open up all of our tables to everybody and just sharing the experiences and the wine. So if you're in a place where you see Portuguese wine, get it, try it. If you don't like it, you didn't spend more than $20 on it, right? Because we know that there's a lot of wine out there that it costs a lot more, that maybe they're not that great. So at least with Portuguese wines, if it's not great, you're not out of pocket a whole lot of cash. So that's my takeaway.
That's fantastic. So if people do want to buy more bottles of these, try out the rosé, some of the other wines that we've talked about here tonight, they can go to your website and pick these up. Are there other places in LA? Put that, there it is.
Okay, so that's my website, and
so DinizCellars.com, DINIZ Cellars.com.
Yeah. And if you use the code Portugal, you get 20% off. That's active always. So, if you decide 6 months from now, you remember us, you put in that code, you still get it. We're also at Wally's and Winehouse and Vendome and Toluca Lake. We're also in a couple places in San Francisco, but we're very boutique. So we're not everywhere. We're trying to be everywhere. But if you have any more, like if you want to see us somewhere close to you, let me know. Like if you're near Sonoma, there's a couple of places. There's Tasca Tasca. It's a restaurant in Sonoma. We're there. I see Sabrina. Yes. So we have quite a few wines up there. We're a K&L as well. But without a doubt, you can always find us on our website. You can go to K&L and the Wally's and maybe not.
If you need some leads up here in Paso Robles, Atascadero, and San Luis Obispo, let me know if you want to move to the Central Coast.
I do. So I will send you an email if you have any recommendations, because again, I'm a one-woman show, but I would take my show on the road.
It's a little harder sell in wine regions. Wine regions,
I know.
especially small ones, are not as there aren't as many opportunities.
But there are some retailers that focus on international wines. So I think there's definitely some possibilities for a Portuguese centric distributor to come in and kind of make a push.
Yeah, and Portugal is God, it's become so popular. It's almost as if it came out of thin air and no one's just like, oh, what? This is a country? Wow. And it's been around for ever. And I'm going to leave it with one last fun fact. Before I tell you, raise of hands, who knows how Madeira is tied to American history?
Oh, who?
Allison, I know. Hold on.
Oh,
how Madeira won.
Madeira?
I do think that certain friends in the corner there who came to the Madeira event in LA, Stacy, should know this.
Does it involve Thomas Jefferson?
Maybe.
Okay.
So,
of course it does, because that's what Madeira is famous for.
Right. So for those of you who don't know as much, of course, we are now in a time in the country's history where we are thinking about tariffs and taxes and things that are being imported and how that affects all the things, right? So the first revolution, in school, we were taught about the Boston Tea Party, right? All the tea over the ships, and great. But what people do not know, or they weren't told, because it's certainly not part of the history books, is that Madeira wine. So when our founding fathers came here, when people got off the many boats from Europe, one of the first things they try to do is make wine. from local native varieties, and they realized that that wine was just not great,
No,
right?
that's called Scuppernong. It's bad.
Yeah, I haven't tried it, but I'm sure, you know.
Don't. It's not worth it.
Thanks. I'll save my calories and my taste buds. So really the only thing that they had left was just to import it, right? So where did they go? They went to Madeira. So Madeira, we know, is an oxidized wine. It needs heat, it needs time, it needs sunshine, mostly heat. So from the Madeira Island to the US, that's how it cooked, that's how it got its essence. So George Washington was known to drink a bottle of Madeira wine a day until his death. I kind of feel maybe that's why he was also using dentures, because of all that sugar. But I don't know. I'm not a dentist.
They were all drunk on Madeira.
They really all
That's why
were.
he could not tell a lie. It was the original in vino veritas.
Because he was full of liquid courage and liquid truth.
That's why he crossed the Delaware.
Exactly. So Madeira wine, which is a Portuguese wine, is partly responsible for a revolution. And when the Declaration of Independence was signed and celebrated, it was signed and celebrated with Madeira wine. So Portuguese wine has an incredible place in American history, and it's part of the reason that we are here. So to circle it back to a country that people just didn't even know it existed until a few years ago, to have this incredible history and know that we are America, in part because this was an imported product that the Brits were trying to overtax. And it was an actual importer of this Madeira wine that had a ship off the shore that was not allowed to be brought in. And he actually went to the founding fathers to be like, hey, we need to do something about this. And that is one of the things that got this conversation started. So this 4th of July, when you celebrate, I invite you to have a glass of Portuguese wine to say thank you to our founding fathers for founding America using Portuguese wine.
I have a bottle of Madeira dating back to 1906 that I will partake in. So
growing up in Jersey, where my parents moved to in Union, there's this university called Kane University, and it was the original home to the first governor of Jersey, and eventually it became part of the university. So in this home, that's now a museum, there was a full wall in the basement, and about 10 or so years ago, maybe less than 10 years ago, maybe like 7 or so years ago, they discovered that this full wall behind that was all this Madeira wine dating back to the 1700s.
Wow.
So, and they sold some of them, they opened some of them, and some of them were actually still quite drinkable, but they still have some other bottles that they left for display. So it's a nod to the birth of America and how Jersey and this particular house and university still holds a bit of that history. So yes.
One last story. There's an amazing essay from Gourmet magazine from back in like the 60s or 70s where the author was reminiscing about her childhood and teenage years, and her father had a bottle of Madeira wine that he kept on the mantle of the fireplace, and every Christmas Eve he would take it down and pour a little bit for himself and his wife, and that was their little piece of joy at that time to celebrate. And she had no idea how old it was, but it was there for decades. And then when she was in her 20s, her boyfriend from college came over and they got drunk one night and came back to the house, and he saw that bottle and basically ended up like pouring himself the rest of the bottle and drank it, and it broke her father's heart, and she's never been able to forgive herself for that moment. But it's a very poignant, amazing story. It's what helped me when I had the opportunity to have the 1906 Madeiras. I knew what it was and sort of told that story, and that's why I have a few bottles of it. So,
I mean, is Guy still alive? He wouldn't be in my house.
He was not. He was a short-lived boyfriend at that point, and the father apparently, instead of like going into a rage, just went into like a deep depression for the next couple of days. So
that's worst. That is that. If I broke my father's heart in that way, no, I'm disappearing people. Like, you're not doing that.
It's a sad story, but it was in an essay
Oh,
collection that I was gifted for one Christmas
yeah.
of great wine and spirits articles from Gourmet Magazine. So yeah,
Oh,
definitely
goodness,
worth checking out.
goodness. That's
Beautiful.
wonderful.
So yes, DIniz Cellars, DINIZ Cellars.com. You can pick up these wines, the rosé that we were talking about, all sorts of fun stuff. That $49 bottle that's your premium. Now I'm, interested in checking out what is the best of the best that you have available.
Mhm.
But this was fantastic. Thank you so much, Sandra.
Thank
We
you all.
appreciate you being here. Before we open things up to everybody, if you can stick around for a few minutes, Sandra,
Yeah, yeah.
want to chat. Next month, the email will be going out on Tuesday, so keep an eye out for that. We have one of the favorites from the Festival of Forgotten Grapes. Quatros Dias is going to be our featured winery of the month. Greg Allen is the winemaker, sources a lot of his grapes from right here in Paso Robles. Lots of fun, interesting wines. He's putting together a really interesting sampling for us. So keep an eye out for that email coming on Tuesday. And with that, if anybody wants to unmute themselves and ask Sandra a question, or she loves your feedback about any of the wines, please feel free to do so.
Don't be shy now.
Yeah, or, forever hold your peace.
I'll ask
Yeah.
a question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have any dry ports? I just recently read an article about, is it Taylor that makes dry ports?
Yes. So let me show it to you. Hold on. What's really fun about this? So I have your dry ports are going to be in the whites. So this is in our website. This is a dry white port, and this is actually another brother and sister team. They won best port producer. So Portugal has a couple of competitions. So one of the biggest ones, they named them the best port producer, besting the Taylors, besting like all the majors, right? So in your dry white ports, or in your white ports world, you have different levels of sweetness, right? You have extra dry, then you have dry. There's still sweetness here, but you get a lot more of that like dry fruit, dry nuts kind of like complexity. And one of the biggest things that's happening in Portugal right now, especially during summer, is a port and tonic. So if you like your gin and tonics, or maybe if you don't, you take like this port, tonic water, a slice of orange juice, and a spring of mint. Oh my God, that's like summer in a glass. It's so refreshing. It's low alcohol, and you have this all over Portugal, from Lisbon to Porto, and it's just really fabulous. So, yes. So in your white ports, you have different sweetnesses. The sweetest one is called lágrimas, or tears, because as you swish, see your tears. But in a white port, those tears are thick. They're biscuits, right? So that is an indication of how much sugar is in there. In this dry white port, you still get that classic sweetness, but it's more on the fruit side. You don't get so much like that sugar, right? So yes,
Sounds
we have one of
amazing.
those. Yeah. And this is the one that I literally was like driving myself wild and just walking all over Porto, be like, I need a dry white port that is not already in the US. And this is just a fabulous one. So
What is this sell for?
I think it's under $20. Hold on. Let me make sure that I'm not, but yeah, it's not
Still,
terrible. Yeah, it's still, I think it's like within like the 20 to $25. Hold online, let me see. $20. And if you use the Portugal code, take 20% off, and it's literally almost free. So,
and it'll last a couple weeks. So
it really will. It really will. And
unlike
this
Madeira that
style
will
of,
last for years, port lasts a couple.
apparently, yes, exactly. So you can definitely have it a few weeks. And I mean, like, I've kept port wine open longer than that, and it still, tasted fabulous for me. And in fact, one of the questions, Chris, that you asked me earlier was, what was my most memorable
Oh
wine?
yes. Yeah, we forgot to start with that. What is the most memorable? We'll end with it. What is the most memorable bottle of wine that you've had, Sandra?
So it's not about but a style.
Okay.
So having grown up in Jersey, so my bloodline is Portuguese. My parents were born and raised there. I mean, we go back. In fact, I did a 23andMe where it told me that I'm 99.8% Portuguese, and we never left a very specific village in like 1500 years. We just
Wow.
never didn't leave,
That's
we had
crazy.
cows and donkeys, so we literally could not move out. So my parents did. They went to Venezuela. I was born there. I grew up in Jersey. And of course, being Portuguese, we grew up drinking port wine. But I was never a fan of port wine. I was just like, I don't know what this is. This is just it's super sweet. I don't like it. It wasn't until I went to Portugal and I actually had port wine there. It's Dona Antonia specifically. And that just changed my world around. And which is funny because like what that told me is that if you love a wine from a region, you almost have to go to that region to get the best, right? Because
Right.
what's being imported is not the best. I try to bring in things that again are incredible there, where a lot of what you're seeing coming in is more the commercial, mass produced. Everybody will like this kind of, but the really true, authentic, super delicious stuff, you almost have to go there. And
Right.
that was my lesson that day, is the fact that being Portuguese, having incredible access to all sorts of ports, it took me going to Portugal to actually love that. So that's my favorite wine story.
Beautiful.
In terms of longevity, what I was once told is that, you know how you can get port that sometimes has that little cork with the top that pops in and out easily, and some have a cork that you have to use a wine key. If it's the wine key cork, those will only last a couple of weeks. And if it's the one you can pop on and off, it'll last months.
Which is this guy, which is why they got the best port producer in Portugal. Different styles, different qualities, but I love to find ports that give you more of that fruit, more of that nuttiness, more of that spice than just sugar and syrup, which I think I think it's kind of the reason why the category is kind of dying off. But when you have it in an application like this, like as a mixer, you can even have it on its own, super chilled. I think it's beautiful. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions for Sandra?
No.
I think Stacy's got one.
Yeah, sorry. These wines were fantastic. It was so fun to explore Portuguese wines. Like I've had a little introduction to them, but grapes that we've never heard of, and so fun. Like the whites, was it the second white? Yeah, it was like very crisp, like higher acidity, minerality, like a little bit like lemongrass, but it was interesting because you said that wine was in oak, but the first white was in stainless steel.
Stainless steel.
Which was funny because at first I would have guessed opposite, the way that it's done, like initially, because of the color, like just the clarity
Absolutely.
of
Yeah.
it. Like it was just, that was a trick wine a little bit, like.
A little bit, yeah, but also the color in the first one is also a little bit indicative of age, right? It's a 2020, so it's aged a little bit more in bottle. But also, when you think about an island white, you don't want to mask any of that. You don't want to mask the acidity. You don't want to mask the freshness of these wines from these terroirs are just so temperamental and so wild. So why would you have that behind oak, right? So stainless steel is going to be the style that's going to give you the best, more direct interpretation of that region, and that style as well. I think my earpods are breaking up, but if you don't hear me, let me know. But yeah, so
We got you. Just keep talking.
But that's what an island wine would give you in that style. When you have just straight up stainless steel, it's to hide nothing at all. When you have oak, they're not really trying to hide anything per se. I mean, some people might, especially if their wines are a little, off. But in a Douro, because that's really more traditionally how things are made. I don't know if I've had a 100% stainless steel Douro white wine, right? And in Portugal, we have different classifications, not official classifications, but we have in the whites, we have Vinha Verde, which is the style, is like this bright acidity, light effervescent wine. And then in the whites, you have what we call mature whites. So that basically tells you that your mature whites is anything outside of Vinha Verde, but also whites that are aged in some sort of vessel, right? So in your Douros, you're more traditionally going to have some sort of aging capability. But like I said, in this producer, they do it in such a way where the oakiness, it doesn't steal away from anything else, right? So your stainless steel is going to give you clean, direct, to show you all the things. And your oakiness is going to give you more roundness. Sometimes it's going to hide some stuff, but in this producer, they're much more restrained. So they're using it more to like add character, add texture, add some finesse, but they're not here to be like, oak is in your face, you know? So.
Yeah, 100%. It was delicious and fantastic. So good. And between like the reds, it was interesting of the 2019, like Reserva, how that had like with a little more fruitiness, like kind of like a little more softness. And then the Popa, the 2020, had kind of like more of that earthiness, kind of like that traditional, you know, barnyardy, you know, European style, which was like really interesting.
Yeah, and technically, you know, your Alentejo wines, which that first red is from, is going to give you a lot more ripeness, is going to give you a lot more of the like heavier body. But because that is so, it's a lot more rustic, I felt the should go first just to sort of like set the scene. And then you go to your Douro where you get like all those complexities and those that round profile. But again, if you were to have another Douro wine, it would probably be bigger, more oaky.
Now this one's only 13.5% alcohol. I mean, the Douro one.
Yeah, they're like they're low alcohol. Both of them were very like.
Well, the other's 14. It's not heavy in alcohol, but it's not low.
Yeah, and you're more likely to find hotter wines in an Alentejo in the south because it's a much warmer climate. But like I said, like these guys, they're being very specific as to how they're building their wines, just to show character of the fruit, style of the region, that minerality, and not over extracted, not overripe, not over oak. So they're actually working very cleanly and with a lot of restraint, which I think is beautiful.
Now, I apologize if I missed this, but like, are they both done in oak or new oak, or how old, or like?
They're both done in oak, in new oak, but it's all French. It's all French new oak. But the cooperage is like each winemaker, each producer, they decide how toasty or not their oak is going to be, right? Yeah. So actually,
medium plus heavy, whatever it might be.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I didn't lose you. But yeah, so French oak, 12 months. But I think it really comes down to how toasty that oak was and how charred it was. Okay. What else?
Fantastic. Any other questions?
One other question, like, and again, I apologize if I missed this. Like, how has your business been more impacted with like tariffs, or is it small enough that it's not as much? I mean,
how big a check do you have to write at the port?
Or is it different because like you're a smaller importer? Is it different? Like, yeah.
I think if there's a difference, it's Portugal, not size.
So let me tell you, the literal tears I cried when the tariffs talk came out. I mean, when they first talked
on Liberation Day,
I really had I had a bit of a panic attack. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to have a business in 6 to 8 months, especially when they're talking about 200%. I was just like, are you kidding me? Like, how am I ever going to stay in business? But then when they're like, oh, we'll do the 20%, I was like, maybe that's manageable. And then they did the split, the 10% first, and then the second 10% in July or what have you. You know, I I had a lot of conversations with my producers, and everybody has to have skin in the game. And we all understand that the market fluctuates the way that it's going to fluctuate. And I'm going to do everything that I can to keep things the way that they were pre-tariffs, right? So we had to get creative somehow with our invoicing and what we were bringing in. But I think time is going to tell, because I literally am waiting for a shipment to come. It's already on US soil. It hasn't arrived to my warehouse. But when we placed this order and the 200% tariffs were in talks, my transportation company literally sent an email and said, if your stuff is not on the water this second, it's not coming.
Right.
So they actually stopped us, and I was like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm out of product. What am I going to do? So then eventually, so they called me and they're like, look, if you want this stuff to come in, then you have to sign a letter saying that you are going to be okay with whatever the tariffs are when they land.
Yep.
So they can be 200%, 100%, but also, okay, these wines. Okay, let's say this wine. What is it? Like maybe like 27, 28 bucks, right? Maybe you buy it at this price, but if I told you that now this wine is 50 bucks, 60 bucks, would you buy it? So then I am running the risk of bringing in something that I then can't sell, right? So we're trying to be as strategic as we can. We're doing small lots, right? But at some point, we're going to have to be like, look, the producer has to take some. We have to take some, and unfortunately, some of this is going to have to be passed on to the consumer.
Unfortunately, Sandra, I don't think you weren't in business when the first tariffs hit in 2016.
No.
A lot of importers did take the hit, so consumers didn't feel it. So the problem is, a lot of importers I know cannot take the hit this time and do what you're trying to do, because they took the hit the first time, they absorbed the cost so that we didn't feel it. And, there's only so long that a winery can make less money, you can make less money, so that we don't have to pay more money.
Yeah, you might get that first shipment in and be able to sell it, but then you're not going to be able to bring in a second shipment because you now know what the costs are going to be, and it's just astronomical. The good news is that the taco trade is real. The Trump always chickens out. So, but that doesn't mean that there's not going to be some tariffs up there, and even a 10%, 20% raise on your prices, because these are such great quality to value wines, definitely shifts your margins.
It's to what you said, where eating out is no longer inexpensive.
Right.
Right. And also what people need to think about is that I understand the sentiment behind it, but it's just like, think about your American wineries, right? Absolutely. This is an opportunity for them to maybe have more space and be in front of more consumers. But then you have to think about, yes, they grow their grapes here, but where do they get their glass?
Right.
Where do they get their corks?
No.
Portugal is the #1 exporter of corks.
Right.
Right.
And Mexico for glass.
Correct.
And
Mexico and
for
China
barrels,
for glass,
and Italy for stainless steel.
Correct.
And
correct. And another big glass producer was Ukraine. So when Canada. So when the Ukrainian war started, one of my producers from the down, she's like, we get our glass from Ukraine. We can't get glass.
Right.
So their prices went up, right? So then you think about all the packaging, everything that goes into making a single bottle of wine and where everything comes from. So it doesn't matter how you cut it.
Foils from China.
All the things. So everything is impacted, right? And I would tell you what some people are doing outside of the wine industry, and you can take this information and do with it as you wish. So my husband is a banker, and he works with companies whose revenue are 50, 100, $200 million a year.
No wonder he's sober.
I know there's a lot of pain in that industry as well. And he happened to be at a dinner, and one of his coworkers is just like, I just met with so-and-so company that imports from China. You know what they're doing?
Going through Vietnam.
they technically, they're talking t-shirts. If the t-shirt costs the importer $4 coming from China, what they do is that on the invoice, they put $2.
Perhaps the
yeah.
recording should not be recording right now.
Oh, professional.
I'm happy to stop
I'm
here.
just saying who they are. I'm just